Mornings like this are wonderful. There's a warm breeze. The rain is gently falling. I can hear the birds singing. It feels like summer. It feels like a new beginning. On days like this, I like to think about my life and the people in my life, and I can't help but think about my great-grandfather. He was one of those individuals for me that were so significant. I loved him so much. He came to this country in the early 1900s and was a fruit and vegetable peddler, if you could imagine that. He raised 8 children with my great-grandmother. He was one of those people for me that has always been incredible. By the time I came on the scene, he was elderly. But I remember when he would come to visit. I was a small child and I loved when he came to visit. He'd drive up in this big car, I don't even know what kind it was, and he'd park in front of our house, always kind of half on the curb. I'd be outside playing, but I always came in because I would love to sit by him. I'd love to hear his stories, the stories that he would tell in his very thick accent. One of the things that I would always do is I'd ask him, Pa, who's the president of the United States? Not because I was testing his knowledge on the current president, but because I loved his answer. And he seemed to never get tired of me asking. So I'd ask him, Pa, who was the president of the United States? And he would lean forward in his chair, he would tilt his head, he'd put his finger up and he'd say, now let me see. There was a George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and he'd go on until he got to the current president. I loved listening to him. I loved the pride that he had, the knowledge that he shared. When he was finished, he'd wink at me and smile until the next time. One of the things that I most remember about him is his love for opera. He himself had this booming, strong, rich voice, and he would sing and fill the room with his melody at a moment's notice. He instilled in us a love of opera, and so I grew up with Pagliacci and Carmen, Aida. I grew up with all of the greats. A story that has always stayed with me was about composer Giacomo Puccini. When he was writing his last opera, he got stricken with cancer, and he died before his opera was finished. But one of the things that he told his students was that if I die before this opera is finished, please finish it for me. As fate would have it, he did. And so his students studied his last opera, Toradante. And when they studied it, they were able to finish it. In 1926, in Milan, there was the premiere of this opera. And his favorite student, Arturo Toscanini, directed it. It was beautiful until it came to the part where Puccini had died. At that point, Toscanini put his baton down and he was crying, and he turned to the audience and he said, "This is where the master put his pen down." There was silence in that opera house. And then, through tears and a big smile, he said, "But his disciples have continued to write." He turned, and with tears, he continued to direct until the opera was over. When it was finished, there was thunderous applause. Everyone was on their feet. And some say it was Puccini's greatest opera of all, because his students continued his work. This weekend, we celebrate the Feast of Pentecost. In some ways, the Master has his students, us, the disciples, continue the work of the church. This weekend, when we celebrate the Spirit coming alive to the apostles and commissioning them with the important work of spreading the gospel message, of allowing the Spirit to work through them and with them in the world. We, like Puccini's students, like Puccini's disciples, are called to continue writing the story, to continue writing the Master's work. As we celebrate Pentecost this weekend, we open our church for the first time in a very long time for public worship. We continue, whether in the building, in our homes, we continue the work to those we meet of spreading the gospel message, of allowing the Spirit to be alive in us. The Master continues to write the story through each of us. And I dare say, like Puccini's work, it is the greatest of all works. Until next time.